Blood, viscera, and vomit stain the stone as a gigantic naked mole rat centaur wields a bulbous club and bashes it into the crowd of struggling dwarves. The cavern resounds with shouts and screams as my desperate citizens lunge for the creature with rocks and fists, battering it as children wail. It's a desperate struggle. The smell of gore and sweat chokes the air as the crowd presses forward with the hope that they can pin the beast long enough for the guards to arrive with steel and saber. The frantic clash ends as the mole creature gutters blood out of its neck onto the floor, its head caved in and its clawed feet thrashing. 3 dwarves have been slaughtered in the fray, their bodies split open and their bones smashed. Bruised and battered, the surviving dwarves disperse under the guard's command to return to their days of weaving cloth, brewing beer, and smelting the steel needed to stave off the next beast's attack. Despite the ferocity and the newly filled coffins, this is just another day in the fort for my unlucky dwarves. This is my favorite game, creatively called Dwarf Fortress. I've been playing it on and off for over a decade, trying to hone my skills so that my dwarves don't end up smeared over the walls like a demented Jackson Pollock. It's one of my biggest time sinks whenever I'm craving a world that can swallow me, or at the very least the kind of city builder that switches like lightning between Zen creation and a maddening, frenetic race for survival. It's a game that I've recommended over and over to all of my friends, but it's also a game where the number of friends who've actually taken the time to play it, I can count on one hand. I can't blame them when the learning curve looks like this, and especially when the community's motto is losing is fun. Still, I've created this video as a way to scribe out my own love of this game in both its brutality and its complexity without going into spoilers. There's an unvarnished beauty in the way Dwarf Fortress builds a Hobbesian world where life is nasty, brutish, and short if your attention slips too long. Yet the sprawling mega projects and dwarven mechanics add pockets of civility like an oasis you've personally doused and tapped like a wellspring. And sure, if it was the average roguelike where your run can be swept away with a bad play or a devastating misclick, then I think most people would get it. But playing Dwarf Fortress is for the people who enjoy eating the woody part of their Lucky Charms. The kind of people who look at an Excel spreadsheet and salivate like a pit bull in front of a small child. For example, there is no bulk clothing item, but individual socks, shoes, gloves, robes, tunics, leggings, caps, etc. When you butcher a pig, it gives you everything from the lungs to the heart to the tripe. Each action is as granular as the devs can make it, and the creation processes reflect that. Those items and every item in-game is created by a dwarf either in your fortress or somewhere else on the map, and it's as realistic a process as possible. Let me show you what I mean. To create a shirt, we first have to make sure it's the correct season for the plant we want to grow, plant the seeds, grow the plant, harvest the plant, process the plant to thread, spin the thread into cloth, choose which type of garment we want to make, potentially dye it, have a dwarf come by and create that garment, and then hope to God that the dwarf we want comes by and picks it up as well. Those are also just our starting plants. I'm not even covering my giant cave spider silk farm, where I've harvested one of nature's deadliest predators and turned it into my personal weaver. Ignore the lucky volunteer who's getting spider gunk blasted over his face. Yet that's exactly what I love about this game, the granularity. Dwarf Fortress is the epitome of an immersive sim, a game in which all the complexity of its elements comes back together into a series of mechanics that the founders never could have anticipated. The abomination that is my silk farm is exactly one of those, and it's a great example. There's nothing in the game's code that tells your dwarves to capture a spider, and no function for putting it in some sort of milking building. Instead, intrepid players figured out that you could cage a spider, jerry-rig a turret out of fortifications, and dupe a hapless dwarf into standing in front of it. The enraged spider puts its gooey little web spinner against the wall and gunks the dwarf. The Bukake overspray shoots behind him into your collection room. That silk collects on a bridge that then falls into a pit where your weavers can safely collect the valuable threads and spin them into silk clothes traders will buy at a premium. All of that is driven by player ingenuity and knowledge of the game's mechanics. That's the depth and richness that draws me and so many others in, especially when you eventually do crash and burn as a goblin siege bursts through your doors. In a game like RimWorld, I know that the storyteller is generating waves of raiders or pacing out different encounters, but with Dwarf Fortress, any event that is sent my way is due to the renown of my fortress and what the other civilizations on hand think of my fort's actions. If the goblins nearby don't have enough resources to send a raid, they won't. Yet if I've pissed off 3 dark fortresses and a necromancer, then sure as shit I might end up besieged by the undead and 3 waves of ontologically evil knee nibblers all at once. I love that. I love that the world isn't especially cruel to you, but follows a natural logic. It follows the consequences of your actions. If you're doing well and you're bragging about that to the travelers in your tavern, they'll take those rumors back to their own forts and let their rulers know. They'll send spies to map out your traps for their raids, and they'll work on schemes to steal your priceless artifacts. If you're not doing so hot, you might end up slapped here or there, but you'll generally be able to keep your head down and trudge along, especially if you haven't hunted for a specifically difficult spot. But the fact that I can plonk myself down next to a necromancer's tower, bait them into sending their best zombified goons at me, and then steal away their weapons just to drop them on their own spears, that activates my monkey neurons better than a radioactive banana. But getting there is a painful process. Thankfully, the Steam update has streamlined a lot of the UI issues that we used to solve with muscle memory and tendinitis, but there's still an absolute deluge of information to get through. Complexity breeds complexity, and navigating through the menus can still be a chore even for me, someone with a decade of experience. I only just found out that the squad training orders have flexibility that prevents forgetting an entire task force in their burrow, and that's because I was lucky enough to read the right Reddit post. It's difficult to push the game towards a friend and tell them to try it when its manual could be thick enough to stop a bullet. The only reason I got into it was the dearth of time I had in high school, and the only reason I honed my skills was because I was an unemployed NEET coming out of college. It's difficult to look at someone who enjoys Factorio or Timberborn just knowing they'd love this game too, if they had the time to dedicate to it the way a Tibetan monk dedicates himself to the Bodhisattva. Dwarf Fortress is my forever game. There's no other game I've played for as long or as consistently. I still have fond memories of being 16, downloading the Lazy Noob Pack, cracking open Dwarf Therapist, and immediately drowning my fort in an aquifer. The fact that there's such a brilliant and knowledgeable community is a testament to the creativity and dedication of its members. I mean, one of my absolute favorite things is that there's a band that took the in-game Dwarvish language and made songs out of it just so the community could incorporate the music into sound mods. The fact that the devs then took those songs and added them to the official release, let alone contracted the band to make more for the OST, is the icing on the cake. It's that kind of community support and engagement that I absolutely love to see in games like this, let alone the player-driven stories like Tufted Stockades or Boat Murdered. The fact that you have to find the narrative out of the game's own shape, that you're guiding the flow like dams in a river, makes it feel alive. There's a charm to the way that your dwarves act with their own agency, even if you'll be screaming at the screen as they drop a sock and prop open the one door between you and an army of goblins. But there are a few other games that make me feel like a literal queen bee. And I think that's the final thing that draws me in so deeply. Every beehive is different. It doesn't matter if you're comparing a fortress between players or between yourself. The ways in which you adapt the terrain and your own playstyle always leads to a unique game. Whenever I was playing RimWorld, I generally always ended up with the same style of base. A kill box, a freezer, and a dense series of rooms for sleeping and storage. When it comes to Dwarf Fort, there's no real optimal way to arrange out your locale. I've had kill boxes, but I've also had tunnels feeding into drowning chambers and magma furnaces. I've worked with everything from palatial personal rooms to dense matchstick rows that give dwarves only what they need. Each fortress becomes something fractaline, recursive at times, but also entirely separate and distinct from its neighbor. There's always something new you've learned that you bring with you into the next fort, and that ensures that the game never feels stale. Dwarf Fortress is intensely complicated. That's the charm of it for me. It's one of the densest and most mechanically intricate games I've ever played, and continues to become more and more of a Gordian knot the more Tarn and Toady add. I thoroughly enjoy climbing an Everest that continues to grow beneath my feet. I don't think I'll ever master the game in the ways that advanced players like Blind have, but that's part of the thrill. It's also why it's such a deeply difficult game to recommend. There are just so few people I know that have the desire to wade through a UI that'd titillate Franz Kafka just to watch their fort implode when they pierce an underground lake. If you can stomach that kind of learning experience though, you should absolutely jump into Dwarf Fort. The Steam version smooths out a lot of the teething problems you used to have jumping into the game, and the included tutorial isn't bad either. If you want to look at more advanced mechanics, Blind has a great series of tutorials, and I really liked Twisted Logic Gaming's videos as well. In my opinion, Dwarf Fortress is absolutely worth picking up just to mess around with, and I haven't even covered other game modes like Adventurer, which could suck you in for just as long as Fortress, if not longer. If you have any favorite Dwarf Fortress stories, please share them in the comments. I love reading about the insane shit you can get up to in this game. It makes me so happy. And if you do grab a copy, just remember, losing is fun.